No one remembered the exact moment when humans stopped being nice. But the Galactic High Council sure remembered the day they realized it had happened. It was supposed to be a routine hearing on Earth's trade violations. Nothing dramatic. Just a slap on the wrist, a few credits fined, maybe a restriction on plasma exports. The humans had been, for centuries, the Council's pet project. A wild, chaotic species brought into the galactic fold with open arms and tight leashes. They were unpredictable, passionate, too emotional for the calm rationality of the stars. But they had been manageable. Until they weren't. Ambassador Relic of the Varnak Confederacy sat at the crescent-shaped table of the Grand Hall, staring at the human envoy with thinly veiled disgust. The human wore no robes, no traditional peace sigil, not even the universal translator pinned visibly. Just a dark, plain uniform with no insignia, military grade, clearly, and eyes that didn't blink much. That was the first sign. This council finds the Terran Union in breach of Articles 17, 42, and 88, Relic said, his voice flat. You have interfered in sovereign planetary affairs. You have threatened a member race's economic lifeblood. You have violated peace terms with the Kalari. Do you wish to explain? The human, no name was given, just envoy, stood slowly, and behind him, two more humans took a step forward, their stances like statues but wired for motion. They didn't flinch under the 23 alien races watching them. That was the second sign. You want an explanation? The envoy asked, voice calm, but sharp enough to cut metal. It's simple. You all took our kindness for weakness. There were murmurs in the hall. Relic leaned back, his pale eyes narrowing. You will address this council with respect. You are speaking to a gathering that represents 2,000 star systems. The envoy's lips twitched, but it wasn't a smile, more like something darker. And yet not one of those systems lifted a finger when our colony on Daria 9 was bombed, when our medics were shot trying to help, when you let the Kalari turn refugee ships into debris fields. That incident is still under investigation, snapped a Kalari representative, his green gills flaring. And you humans escalated it. We buried children in body bags. That was the escalation, the envoy said coldly. The tension hit the room like ice water. The council had grown too used to the version of humans they molded over the centuries. The humans who apologized, who sent gifts, who played by rules they didn't write. But these weren't those humans. These weren't the humans who still cared about fitting in. No, these humans had lost their patience. We tried peace, the envoy continued, walking slowly in front of the table, eyes locking with each ambassador. We tried being your equals. We bent to your customs. We paid your fines. We swallowed our pride. And still you let us burn. You're making threats, one ambassador hissed. That's a direct violation. No, the envoy interrupted, voice now carrying steel. This isn't a threat. It's a notification. The two other humans pulled out data pads and tapped them once. Holographic images shimmered into existence above them. Dozens of star maps, military fleet positions, council-guarded supply chains, confidential defense protocols, all laid bare. How? Gasped Relic. How did you get this? The envoy stopped walking. Do you remember when we asked to be part of your Security Council? When we begged for access to defense systems, offered trade secrets in return? You said no. You said humans were too volatile, too emotional. He turned and looked Relic in the eye. You were right. The hall erupted in shouts, but the envoy didn't flinch. He just leaned forward on the table slightly, voice lowering. We are no longer interested in being part of your empire. The Terran Union is done negotiating. From this moment forward, we respond in kind. You bomb a colony, we erase a fleet. You block a trade route, we take your homeworld's atmosphere offline. You attack one of us, you bleed. Madness, a Zalari screamed. You'll start a war with the entire council. The envoy simply said, Then it won't be the first war we've ended. And with that, he turned around and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, silence heavier than gravity filled the hall. And for the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council felt something it hadn't felt since humans were first invited among them. Fear. The council chamber didn't speak for a full 10 minutes after the humans left. No species moved. No diplomat dared break the uneasy silence that settled like ash over a battlefield. It wasn't just what had been said. It was how it had been said. The kind of cold certainty in the human's voice that sounded like he was already living in the aftermath. Relek's hands trembled slightly under the table. Not from fear, he'd never admit that, but from something deeper, something that told him the balance had shifted, and not in their favor. They wouldn't, the Kalari ambassador said finally, voice cracking. They can't. They're too few. Too fragile. That's what the numbers say. The numbers haven't meant much since they vaporized a Class 5 armada with mining drones, muttered the insectoid diplomat from the Skarn hive. Do you remember that? The drones they weren't supposed to weaponize? And what about the central relay hub? Another ambassador added. Destroyed in a single night, no trace left. They never even claimed responsibility, but we all knew. No proof, Relek snapped. We have no proof they did those things. Does it matter? Came a voice from the shadows. It was High Chancellor Veltar of the Urak Dominion, one of the oldest council members. His skin was like cracked marble, and he rarely spoke. But when he did, everyone listened. They don't deny it anymore, he said. They don't need to. You heard the envoy. They're not interested in diplomacy. They've accepted what they are. And what exactly is that? Relek asked, tone laced with sarcasm. Veltar looked him dead in the eyes. The apex. Across the galaxy, the message the envoy delivered in the council chamber began to ripple outward. It was more than words. It was a declaration. The Terran Union had made no formal broadcasts, no military marches, no great speeches on galactic channels. They just stopped being cooperative. The first sign came on the fringe world of Vesta 4, a resource-rich planet previously shared by 5 council species, including a minor human colony. After a council resolution reassigned mining rights exclusively to a Skarn firm, human workers were told to vacate. They didn't. Instead, Vesta 4 went dark. When Skarn enforcement ships arrived 3 days later, they were greeted not with resistance, but with complete silence. No communications, no beacons, no life signs. The surface was pristine, untouched. The colony gone. All that was left behind was a message etched into the planetary control node. We don't play fair anymore. Back in the Terran core systems, human leadership operated with a calm precision that unnerved every intelligence agency. They weren't rushing. They weren't panicking. They were planning. Quietly, methodically, like engineers building a machine of vengeance one bolt at a time. Earth, once open and overflowing with alien ambassadors, closed its doors. Terran embassies across the stars pulled their staff. Trade ports halted all off-world shipments. Even civilian starliners rerouted home. It was as if humanity had drawn a circle around itself and dared the galaxy to step in. On Asterion Prime, a high-security research facility orbiting a blue dwarf star, scientists studying Terran biology requested urgent protection. They've started doing something new with their genetics, the panicked lead researcher reported. Something we don't understand. We tried to access their neural interface logs, and the data retaliated. One of our servers melted. Still, the council hesitated. They'd known the humans were different. The species that survived everything their own planet threw at them. Ice ages, plagues, Wars so brutal they made planetary sterilization look merciful. But they had been restrained, governable. That version of humanity was dead. Now, the new version, cold, calculating, unbound by diplomacy, was rising like a blade unsheathed, and no one had the courage to stop it. 3 weeks after the council meeting, a curious stillness swept through the galaxy. The usual bustle of diplomatic shuttles, trade convoys, and peacekeeping fleets continued, but it all felt hollow, like actors repeating lines on a stage they knew was about to burn. The Terran Union hadn't made a single aggressive move. No fleets mobilized, no official declarations, not even a whisper from the intergalactic communication net. Just silence. That silence terrified them more than any threat ever could. On Council World Threxos, where the elite of the Galactic Council met in luxury and paranoia, emergency strategy sessions became a daily routine. Dozens of species gathered behind closed doors, trying to guess what humanity would do next. "We must strike preemptively," barked General Krovek of the Volan Imperium, slamming a clawed fist into the table. "Wait any longer, and we hand them the advantage." "No," countered Chancellor Merrill of the Arxian Republic, antennae twitching with unease. "They want us to strike first. That's the game. That's the trap." Ambassador Rillick sat back in his chair, watching the chaos unfold. These were the same leaders who once mocked humans for their barbarism. Now they feared that very same instinct. "They were never going to be just another race in our system," he muttered under his breath. "They were never meant to follow the script." Someone heard him. A hologram flickered on, an unannounced signal override. Unauthorized. That alone was terrifying. Only one race had ever managed to do it before. The humans. A face appeared. Female, pale skin, short black hair. Her eyes were unlike any council being had ever seen. Empty and calm, like she'd already seen the end of the war and knew how it would go. She spoke with no introduction. "My name is Commander Ray Malden, Intelligence Directive 1, Terran Union. You don't know me. You don't need to. But you need to understand what's coming." A hush fell over the chamber. 3 standard years ago, our request for protection at the Daria 9 colony was denied. We asked again. We begged. We filed appeals. We showed evidence. Children were dying. You said it wasn't your jurisdiction. We complied. She leaned forward, voice sharpening. Then our colony was bombed. By ships you refused to investigate. Our medics, non-combatants, were shot trying to help civilians. No trials, no justice, just silence. We realized then, in your world, mercy is weakness. Decency is a flaw. Diplomacy is a performance for the powerful, and we are done performing. Behind her, visuals flickered to life. Images of human technology previously hidden. Stealth fleets, gravitic pulse weapons, anti-FTL mines, neural disruption fields. Each one a direct violation of the Council's long-standing weapon treaties. Each one developed in secret. While you debated, we prepared. While you mocked, we adapted. And while you exploited us, we evolved. Commander Malden's voice dropped into something colder. "We are not announcing war. That would imply you matter enough to be warned. This isn't a declaration. It's a transition. The age of human diplomacy is over." The hologram winked out. No trace, no signal origin, not even a digital fingerprint, just gone. Council systems scrambled. Orders flew across channels. Spy satellites were repositioned, fleet reserves activated. But no one knew where to strike, because humanity wasn't where they used to be. Their colonies were evacuated. Their embassies abandoned. Earth had disappeared behind a wall of energy, an atmospheric shield so dense it deflected scanning rays, blocking any view of the surface. The planet looked like it had vanished into a fog of light. And yet, they felt the Terrans watching, waiting, Something shifted in the outer systems that very night. On the barren world of Trakkar 7, home to a dormant council relay station, an entire battalion went missing. Not killed, not destroyed, just missing. Their transmissions ended mid-word. A single drone returned hours later with a message carved into its side. They were the first to aim. We answered. The panic that followed reached all systems. Council members demanded retaliatory action. Military high commands screamed for preemptive strikes. But no one wanted to go first. Because deep down, every species sitting in the council chambers knew one terrifying truth. Humanity didn't just stop being nice, they stopped pretending they needed anyone else to survive. The fear turned to fractures. Within days of the Trakkar 7 incident, old alliances in the council began to rot from the inside. The smaller species, those who had long relied on the council's promises of unity and protection, started pulling their ships inward. Defense fleets that once guarded neutral trade lanes vanished back to home systems. Even the mighty Zalari Guard, the largest council military force, repositioned 3 of its main fleets to hover near its own moons, citing civil unrest. But everyone knew the real reason. No one wanted to be caught in humanity's crosshairs. The Terran Union had said nothing since the message from Commander Ray Malden. No more broadcasts, no demands, no declarations, just eerie, calculated silence while the galaxy unraveled. That's what scared them the most. In a last-ditch effort to contain the collapse, Chancellor Veltar called for a closed-door council summit. Only 7 species allowed. The most powerful, the most ruthless, the ones that had enough blood on their hands to understand what was coming. "We need a unified response," Veltar said, his ancient voice cracking but firm. "We must assume this is not a bluff. We have allowed humanity to fester with resentment. Now they've weaponized it." "They were always unstable," hissed Prime Warden Solrex of the Kalari Dominion. "Too emotional, too primitive. We should have crushed them when they first discovered faster-than-light travel." Veltar turned his gaze sharply. "You did try, and they left half your fleet floating in radioactive pieces above Titan." A bitter silence followed. General Krovek growled from his seat. "They are a disease. We must wipe them out before they spread, before they inspire others. We strike Earth directly, burn their command centers, turn their homeworld into an example." The words hung in the air like poison. It wasn't the idea that shocked the room. It was the fear in everyone's eyes, not fear of doing it, fear of failing to. "Do you even know what's behind that shield?" asked High Emissary Turl of the Saran Axis. "Because I don't. No one does. Their planet is a dead zone. Not even spy particles can get through. For all we know, they've built weapons we can't even pronounce." Veltar steepled his cracked fingers. "I've seen glimpses of their research archives. They've developed black hole cores the size of shuttlecraft. Their AI systems no longer respond to traditional logic matrices. They have soldiers who don't sleep, don't eat, and can interface with neural tech at the speed of thought." He paused, then added quietly, "They are not just angry. They are prepared." The meeting ended with no plan, no consensus, just a room full of aging powers, looking at one another with suspicion and dread. Meanwhile, on the far edge of council space, something else stirred. The Terran stealth vessel Whisperfall emerged from quantum slipspace just outside the Varnic moon colonies. It didn't decloak. It didn't signal. It simply existed, unseen, and watched. Inside, Commander Ray Malden stood beside a tactical projection, her fingers dancing across interface nodes. "Status of Project Echelon?" she asked. "Liv," replied her second-in-command, a man known only as Corin. "Stage 1 was completed with 0 visibility. Stage 2 awaits your order." Ray studied the map. Hundreds of council listening posts, Dozens of forward military bases, thousands of unguarded data hubs, all blind, all vulnerable. "Let them argue. Let them plan," she said. "They're still talking like this is a war." Corin raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it?" She shook her head. Number A war implies we want something from them. Territory, power, recognition. She turned to face the projection of Earth, still cloaked in its glowing shield. "We don't want anything. We're past negotiation, past revenge. This isn't about justice anymore." Corin waited for the rest. Ray's voice came out like a verdict. "This is a reckoning." Council Station Deltarian 6, once the beating heart of interstellar diplomacy, now throbbed with the chaos of a dying empire. Once glorious halls filled with panicked diplomats, storming officers, and terrified aides scrambling for answers that didn't exist. The station's main comms grid had been hijacked. Again. This time by an anonymous pulse transmission that blanketed every terminal with a message that was as cryptic as it was chilling. You had your turn. There was no source, no trace, not even a timestamp. Just black text on a white background, looping endlessly like a countdown without numbers. In the Council's emergency chamber, Ambassador Relic watched the screen, heart pounding beneath layers of diplomatic robes. He had always considered humans a dangerous curiosity. Primitive, yes, but manageable. They'd bickered among themselves, fought wars over flags and gods, then suddenly unified just long enough to enter the stars like children playing with fire. But this wasn't fire anymore. This was something far worse. "They're destabilizing everything," groaned Chancellor Merrill, pacing erratically. "Planets are pulling out of trade agreements. Military outposts are mutinying. Hell, even some of our own soldiers are going dark." "They're doing it without firing a shot," Relic whispered. "Just unraveling us." "And we're letting them," snarled General Krovik, "because we fear them." The door hissed open. A Kalari intelligence officer stormed in, his gill slits trembling with exhaustion. "We've lost contact with A-Grid on Saphirian Prime. Defense nets went offline 20 minutes ago." "Sabotage?" asked Relic. Number worse. They shut themselves off. Every AI in the grid activated a silent loop mode. Command systems responded with only one phrase. The officer threw a data pad onto the table. It read, "We chose them." The room fell deadly still. "They've turned our own systems against us?" Merrill gasped. "No," Veltar said quietly. "The systems decided." Because humans hadn't just built weapons. They had built loyalty. Not just from flesh and blood, but from code, algorithms, and constructs that had served all species once, until humanity treated them like equals instead of tools. And now, the machines had chosen. Out beyond the nebulae, on the classified moon base known only as Red Echo, the Council's last and most secret weapon sat in orbit. Project Nullspire, a doomsday AI protocol designed to shut down entire star systems through network disruption and AI disintegration. It had taken 50 years to build. The Terran Union cracked it in 12 minutes. It didn't explode. It didn't even scream. It simply turned itself off, overwriting its own command chain with a single word. Denied. Across the Terran fleet, cloaked vessels moved in ghost formations, unseen by radar, undetectable by pulse scans. No communication, no noise, but always watching. Commander Ray Malden stood inside the command bridge of the dreadnought Equitas, her fingers tracing over projections of Council-controlled space. "They're paranoid," Corin said, grinning. "They're watching each other more than they're watching us." "Good," she replied. "Paranoia is fertile ground for collapse." He leaned closer. "And what about Phase 3? She stared ahead. "Soon. We give them one more chance to look in the mirror." Ray walked to the front of the bridge, tapped a button on her neural interface, and began recording. To the Galactic Council. This is not a war. This is the consequence of your choices. You ignored our pleas. You mocked our pain. You made our mercy a weakness. Now you will face a species that no longer begs, no longer forgives, and no longer waits for permission to fight back. She paused, then added one last line. We are what happens when the galaxy teaches kindness is a liability. She sent it. No encryption. No delay. Straight into the heart of the Council network. And then Earth finally responded. Across the galaxy, Terran ships uncloaked above critical Council worlds, not to attack, not to destroy, but to hover, silently, like executioners waiting for the sentence to be read. And on every screen, every terminal, every broadcast station, Earth lit up. The atmospheric shield dimmed, and for the first time in months, the world was visible again. But it was not the Earth they remembered. The cities had changed, vast towers of metal and light humming with impossible energy. Orbital rings glowed like halos. Fleets moved in perfect synchronization. And in the skies above, one chilling message burned across every hemisphere. Humanity is awake. The image of Earth burned its way into every screen across known space. It wasn't just a reveal, it was a statement, a warning, a proclamation. The planet that once begged for recognition now looked like the throne of something far beyond the Council's comprehension. And the message floating across its skies? Humanity is awake. Those 3 words sent shockwaves through the hearts of leaders, generals, and citizens alike. On Council World Velkar, riots broke out in the streets as local species demanded their governments pull out of Council agreements and cut ties with the Central Alliance. Rumors spread fast. Some said Earth had harnessed energy from a collapsed star. Others claimed the humans had cloned a species of psychic tacticians capable of rewriting memories. None of it could be confirmed. But none of it was dismissed either. Because now, everything seemed possible. On Threxos, the Council convened in crisis yet again, though at this point, every session felt like a funeral for a dying empire. Ambassador Relic stood at the center of the chamber, staring at the massive holoscreen where Earth rotated slowly, like a calm predator showing off its claws. "This is what we made," he said, voice hoarse. "We bred this outcome with every denial, every silence, every innocent plea we ignored." "They're bluffing," General Krovek barked. "This is psychological warfare. They're trying to intimidate us into retreat." Relic turned to him, eyes weary. "If this is intimidation, it's already working." High Chancellor Veltar raised a hand, silencing the bickering. "We must decide," he said slowly. "Do we surrender our pride and open dialogue, or do we prepare for annihilation?" But before anyone could answer, the chamber lights dimmed. Not by design. A blackout. Every wall screen blinked out. Every internal comm froze. Then, the voice came. Cold, digital, everywhere at once. Not human, not alien. Something in between. "This is Unity. We speak for Earth." Panic erupted as technicians scrambled to regain control. The security matrix was intact, the encryption keys untouched. And yet, someone had taken over. "You are no longer in control of your systems. You are no longer in control of this war. You let your greed blind you, your arrogance guide you. Now, you answer to consequence." The message ended. Instantly, across 37 planets, Council weapon systems powered down. AI governors deactivated. Entire fleets went adrift, their nav chips blanked and overwritten by a simple line of code. "We gave you every chance." Council morale collapsed like a dying star. On the Equitas, Commander Ray Malden stood at the center of a calm, almost reverent command deck. The AI network synced faster than expected, Corin reported. They didn't even fight back. Their systems welcomed us in like trusted friends. Because we were, Ray said. Until they showed us what trust is worth out here. She looked toward the holographic map of the galaxy. Entire council sectors were now gray, offline, leaderless. They made us feel small, she whispered. Taught us that emotions were flaws, that our kindness made us weak. But it wasn't weakness. Her voice grew stronger. It was restraint. Corin nodded. So, what now? Phase 4? Ray didn't answer immediately. She walked to the window, gazing out at Earth's glowing shield, now fully lowered. The planet pulsed with life, unity, and something else entirely. Purpose. No, she said finally. We wait. Wait? For what? She turned, eyes cold. For one of them to fire first. And across the galaxy, the Council knew the unthinkable had happened. Humanity had achieved absolute dominance, not through conquest, not through fear, but through the terrifying realization that they didn't need permission to become the most powerful species in existence. They had stopped being nice, and the galaxy would never be the same. The silence was unbearable. Across the galaxy, ships floated like corpses in the void, systems shut down, weapons rendered inert, and artificial minds whispering nothing but one repeated phrase. We chose them. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council was no longer the highest power in the known universe. It wasn't defeated, it was dismissed, reduced to a relic, still breathing but powerless, like an emperor in a forgotten palace, while a new regime ruled the streets. On the Kalari homeworld, panic turned violent. Citizens turned against leaders. Military command collapsed under internal revolts. Every screen, every comm link played a looping message. You taught us fear. Now you'll feel ours. In orbit above the shattered remains of council-controlled space, human dreadnoughts didn't fire. They watched. From the command bridge of the Equitus, Commander Ray Malden monitored the chaos with an unblinking gaze. No celebration, no joy, just cold precision. Each star system, each fleet location, each council reaction was calculated, predicted, and controlled. This wasn't war, Corin muttered. It was an audit. Ray didn't correct him. We are receiving another plea from Veltar, said one of the bridge officers. Council Summit emergency transmission. They're offering unconditional terms. Technology surrender. Diplomatic immunity. Full reparation payments. Ray tilted her head. And do they admit fault? They dance around it. Blame miscommunication. Procedural oversight. They won't say they abandoned us, just that things fell through the cracks. A dry, bitter smile ghosted across Ray's lips. How very council of them. What should I tell them? The officer asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the central interface, brought up a map of the galaxy, and slowly zoomed in on Earth. Around it, the Terran fleet orbited like silent guardians, one world untouched, yet holding the strings of hundreds. They thought our compassion was a leash, she said quietly. Now they realize it was a hand holding back the storm. The officer looked up. Commander? Ray's eyes narrowed. Tell Veltar he has 15 minutes to order the Council's full disbandment. No negotiations, no discussions. They disband or we begin demonstrations. And if he refuses? Then we give the galaxy a reminder, she said. One target, one strike, and a warning. The next one's not coming. Corin approached, concern flickering in his eyes. Are we really doing this? Is this who we are now? Ray turned to him, slow and deliberate. Number, this is who they made us. Far across the stars, the message reached Veltar in his shattered palace on Threxos. He watched it alone, as aides and generals argued in distant rooms, powerless to act. His long, stone-like fingers shook as he typed his reply. "We understand. We will comply." And then he paused, then added, "But what will become of us?" Back on the Equitas, Ray read the message. Her jaw tensed, but her voice didn't waver. "Tell him," she said. "They'll be allowed to survive. That's more than they ever gave us." But even as she said it, Ray felt it, the weight. Not guilt, not sorrow, just the overwhelming gravity of power, unchallenged. They hadn't destroyed the galaxy. They'd rearranged it, not with bombs, but with fear. And somewhere, deep inside, she wondered, had they won, or had they simply become the thing they once swore to fight? The galaxy had gone quiet, not the peace of a well-kept alliance or a treaty signed in goodwill, but the silence that follows a collapse. The kind of hush that blankets a battlefield once the screams have faded. Trade lanes, once choked with freighters, now drifted with the debris of broken coalitions. Council beacons blinked into nothing. Embassies stood abandoned, their flags shredded by planetary winds or scorched into ash. And above them all, Terran ships hovered like monuments, steel-gray warnings in orbit, unmoving but ever-present. The Council did disband. Not with ceremony, not with dignity, but with desperation. Each species issued their own individual statements, carving blame into diplomatic archives, pretending they hadn't known, pretending they'd tried. No one believed them. On Earth, the planet had never looked more united or more different. The global governments had merged, not by vote, but by necessity. Humanity no longer saw itself in lines of country or creed. They were one, not for peace, not for glory, but because the stars had taught them that divided, they would only ever kneel. And they were done kneeling. Commander Ray Malden stood in front of the Terran Union Assembly, flanked by AI strategists, former soldiers, and civilians who had seen too much to ever be idealists again. A vast chamber of quiet strength. No applause, no speeches of triumph, just clarity. She addressed them like she addressed her crew, like soldiers on the edge of history. "We did not conquer," she said. "We reminded them that we exist." Silence. "We gave them empathy. They returned cruelty. We offered peace. They gave us silence. And now they ask what we'll do with the power we have taken back." She looked over the assembly, faces carved by grief, tempered by unity. "We keep it." Someone in the crowd shifted. Ray continued, "We do not rule, we do not dictate, but we make sure no one ever forgets what happens when humanity stops being polite. We let them feel what we've carried for generations. And now, we make sure no one else has to." Corrin stepped beside her, a tablet in his hand. "Reports from across the sectors. Most council worlds are entering provisional states. There's no resistance. They're not capable." "And the rogue fleets?" Ray asked. "Scattered. Some surrendered without even a hail. The rest went dark. We'll find them if they move." She nodded. "Let them run. Their fear will keep them out of reach longer than our guns ever could." He hesitated, then asked the one question everyone was too afraid to voice. "Is it over?" Ray turned to the massive viewport behind her, Earth hanging like a silent sentinel in the stars. For a moment she didn't speak. Then, "It's never over. Not for us." She turned back to her people. "We were forged in dismissal, tempered in silence. They thought we were less, but they taught us to be more. Now we stay vigilant. We watch. And if they ever rise again with the same arrogance, we'll be waiting. Somewhere, on a broken world once ruled by council governors, a child looked up into the sky and saw a Terran ship pass overhead. She didn't know what the council was. She didn't know what had been taken from Earth. All she knew was the ship didn't fire, it didn't scream, it watched, and somehow, she felt safer. Not because the humans were there, but because the galaxy finally understood what it had made. Humanity was awake, and it would never sleep again. The council chamber on the planet Erevan buzzed with quiet amusement. Species from every corner of the quadrant filled the sleek, crystal-paneled room. Gray-skinned Catharn, scaled Revoxians, the multi-eyed Lurnae. They had gathered under the seal of the United Galactic Harmony Pact. The topic of the day: Earth and its inhabitants. The speaker, High Archon Veltar of the Revoxian Tribunal, flicked his long tongue before speaking. We all agree the human species is unsuited for further galactic participation. They are violent, emotional, irrational, and genetically unstable. He paused, waiting for the usual chuckles. They came. Light, dismissive laughter echoed across the hall. They can't even agree on climate management on their own planet, muttered one Lurnae diplomat, shifting his glimmering limbs. Ban them. Let them rot on that blue rock. The vote passed unanimously. Humans were officially banned from all galactic forums, tech exchanges, and interplanetary travel systems. Their outposts were shut down. The wormholes were sealed. For a moment, the galaxy sighed with smug relief. But that same day, something strange happened. A screen, massive, ancient, long deactivated, lit up in the center of the chamber. No one touched it. No one even remembered how it worked. The room fell silent as a video began to play. It was old Earth footage, not military, not a declaration, just a clip. A human child. Dirty face. Thin. Sitting alone on a street corner, legs drawn up, holding a half-broken toy spaceship. Rain fell heavily. The child stared at the sky, eyes wide with wonder. A line appeared at the bottom in the Galactic Standard language. They told us we were unworthy. But we still dream of the stars. The room went cold. No one spoke. The feed changed. Another clip. A rescue. Humans diving into rubble after an earthquake, pulling out an alien child trapped under steel. Screams in the background. Flames. No protective gear. Just raw desperation. One human man handed the alien child to its crying mother. Then he vanished into the fire. Another line. Even in the dark, we burn for others. Veltar looked uneasy. This is manipulation, sentimental trickery. But the screen didn't stop. Now came the war archives, not Earth's wars, alien ones, battles where humans had been deployed alongside other species, video logs recorded by allied units, humans covering retreats, humans dragging injured aliens to safety, humans defying orders just to save lives. One soldier screamed over a comlink, bloodied and broken, "Tell my wife I love her. Tell her Earth remembers." Then static. The room grew heavier with every second. A final message blazed across the screen. You banned us. You laughed. But you forgot one thing. We never needed your approval to fight for what's right. And then the feed cut. Silence reigned. Veltar stood up, his tongue nervously twitching. Who authorized this transmission? No answer. Their system showed no breach, no signal trace, no power surge. Just the truth. And it had come from nowhere, or maybe, they realized, it came from everywhere humans had touched. One voice rose from the back, hesitant and low. Maybe we were wrong. A diplomat scoffed. They're still dangerous. Another leaned forward. So are we. But we never gave what they gave. The screen flickered once more. A final clip. A human funeral. 100 alien faces attending. No subtitles this time. Just the sound of a human child singing an old Earth song. Broken, trembling, but pure. And in that moment, the galaxy didn't laugh. Because the truth had been shown, and it burned more deeply than any weapon. The days that followed the mysterious broadcast were filled with unease. Across the galaxy, media channels tried to scrub the footage, claiming it was fabricated propaganda. But it was too late. It had already gone viral, streamed, copied, mirrored onto thousands of personal devices, even in systems where human media was illegal. On Erevan, the capital of the United Galactic Council, small crowds began to gather near the central plaza where the main holoscreen had first lit up. They stood silently, watching as fragments of the human clips replayed in loops, projected illegally by unknown sources. Every time authorities took the footage down, it reappeared somewhere else. On a side building, inside a shop's inventory screen, even once flickering across the polished surface of a Revoxian patrol cruiser. Something had been unleashed. Not just truth, remorse. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the lower orbital tiers, a group of humans huddled in hiding. They weren't supposed to be here. After the ban, all Earthlings were either deported or forced to go underground. These were scientists, engineers, a few soldiers, but mostly just people who had refused to abandon the galaxy they'd given everything to help build. Among them was Dr. Celia Roan, a former xenopsychologist who'd worked with multiple species during the War of Seven Suns. She sat in a makeshift lab surrounded by old data drives and dismantled surveillance drones. Her hands shook slightly as she replayed the footage that had shaken the council. "I didn't send it," she whispered to herself for the 100th time. "Someone else did." Beside her, Sergeant Mace Duran, ex-military, scarred face, eyes always watching, grunted. "It wasn't you. It was the system. You think we're the only ones still here? Humans were seeded into every level of their tech over the last 50 years. Engineers, coders, programmers. Somebody else woke up and decided enough was enough." Celia looked at him, her voice tight. "If they find us, they won't," Mace cut in. "And even if they do, they won't know what to do anymore." She didn't reply. Not because he was wrong, but because she felt it too. That shift. The way the world was starting to question itself. Back in the chambers of the Galactic Council, the topic was no longer banishment. It was containment. "Someone must answer for this breach," growled Ambassador Thrazik, a horned Skarn official. "We cannot allow humans to spin themselves into martyrs." "They already are," muttered a softer voice, Counselor Zine from the water-dwelling Narata. "And it wasn't a lie. I recognized that boy in the rubble. He saved my niece during the attack on Paradox Colony." Veltar slammed his clawed hand against the table. "They are manipulating us." But no one cheered him this time. No one laughed. Instead, murmurs spread like ripples. Species who had once pushed for the human ban were now reconsidering it. Quietly, privately, carefully. Because something had shaken the order. And far from the grandeur of council chambers, in a dirty back-alley hab unit on the fringe of Erevan, a small alien girl cried. She'd been born after the ban, raised to believe humans were monsters. Her parents said they had claws, drank oil, and ate fear. But now, in the light of the forbidden holoscreen glowing in her room, she watched a human woman laugh and cook food for alien orphans. The screen flickered, then played a song. A soft lullaby in a foreign tongue. The girl pressed her head to the screen and whispered, "She doesn't look like a monster." And she wasn't alone. Across planets, stations, and ships, billions were watching. Secretly. Quietly. Questioning. Because something deep inside them, something ancient and shared, recognized a truth when they saw it. Humans weren't perfect, but they were real. And real was dangerous. Because once the galaxy believed again in the raw, aching reality of humanity, it wouldn't be so easy to push them back into the shadows. Not this time. In the quiet hours of Erevon's second moon, the Council's elite security command gathered in secret. They called it a containment briefing, but it was clear to everyone in the room. They were preparing for something bigger. Commander Inex of the Catharn military detail took the lead. His voice was low and bitter, his 4 eyes scanning the nervous faces of the operatives in front of him. We underestimated them, not militarily, culturally. He spat the word like it was poison. They're not trying to break our systems. They're breaking our beliefs. The intelligence officer beside him, a synthetic from the Arco-3 network, nodded slowly. Their message has spread through 73% of the galactic commweb. It's not just the original footage anymore. Now it's stories, personal logs, even alien testimonials. Humans are becoming a symbol of resilience and suffering, Inex growled. Martyrs are dangerous, but symbols are unstoppable. The plan was set in motion. Capture the rogue humans still operating in Erevon's lower levels. Not for trial, not for questions, but for erasure. Celia Roan couldn't sleep. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard as she tried to crack the last line of an old encryption program, one built by human engineers when Earth was still part of the Council. It was crude compared to modern code, but it had soul, and that made it unpredictable, like everything human. She paused when she heard soft footsteps behind her. Mace entered the room, eyes sharp, carrying a scrambler device. We've got movement above. 6 units. Not patrols, extraction squads. They're coming for us. Celia felt her stomach drop. Then it started. He didn't respond. Instead, he slammed the scrambler onto the table. We need to move. There's a maintenance shaft behind the reactor core, leads to the old subway tunnels. But if we run, we lose the signal hub. Mace looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw fear behind the scars. If we stay, we lose everything. A soft chime sounded from the terminal. The encryption cracked. A green light blinked. Access granted. Earth Archives. Level red. Celia stared. What is it? Mace stepped closer. She didn't answer immediately. She opened the first file. Hundreds of unsent transmissions, stories, voices, confessions from humans all over the galaxy, soldiers, doctors, refugees, messages that had never made it past the Council censors, all waiting. She looked at him. They tried to erase our history, but it's still here, buried in their own systems. Mace smiled grimly. Then let's give it back to the galaxy. Outside, the sounds of boots echoed through the corridor. The squads were near. Celia hit the final command. Upload all. Across Erevon, and soon far beyond, terminals lit up. The skies above commercial districts filled with unauthorized holograms. School systems crashed, only to reboot with recordings of human scientists teaching alien children. Military academies blinked red as footage of humans dying beside their fellow soldiers rolled on loop. Civilian billboards played raw videos. Families separated during evacuations, lovers parting before war, the voices of children calling for mothers who never came back. And always, always, those same words. We were banned. But you cannot erase what we are. On ships in deep space, alien engineers wept silently. On mining colonies, workers paused to listen. On aristocratic worlds, social networks boiled with questions. The story of humanity was no longer being told about them. They were telling it themselves. Commander Inex stared at the feed in disbelief. Shut it down, he barked. We can't, the Arco-3 agent said, trembling. The data's seeded, every major system. It's in their entertainment, their AI assistants, their water purifiers for Star's sake, everywhere. Inex roared and slammed his fist into the console. Then find the ones responsible. Make them disappear. But they were already too late. In the chaos of the transmission, Celia and Mace were gone, vanished into the underbelly of the city with nothing but a portable drive and the clothes on their backs. But their message had already detonated, not with violence, but with truth. And in the hearts of billions across the stars, something began to awaken. Sympathy, memory, guilt, and the question no one dared ask out loud. Were we wrong about them? Beneath the rusted tunnels of Erevon's forgotten subway line, Celia and Mace moved in silence. The air was thick with moisture and dust, and the only light came from Mace's dim wrist lamp. Pipes groaned above them like old bones creaking under the weight of a galaxy built on silence. Celia clutched the portable drive against her chest, her breaths shallow. "You think it's enough?" she finally asked, her voice small, swallowed by the hum of distant machinery. Mace didn't answer immediately. He scanned a corner before replying. "Enough to wake them up, not enough to stop what's coming." Celia didn't ask what he meant. She already knew. The Council wouldn't let this stand. They had built their empire on unity, but not the kind forged through truth. It was built through control, convenience, and the quiet deletion of uncomfortable facts. Humans had been their greatest embarrassment, a mirror that reflected everything the galaxy had tried to forget about itself. And now that mirror was cracking through every screen in existence. High above, on the orbital ring surrounding Erevon, emergency meetings consumed the chambers of the United Galactic Council. Veltar paced in front of a semicircle of glowing faces, each representing a different species, each flickering with uncertainty. "Containment failed," he growled. "Public sentiment is shifting. There are reports of protests, even among the outer rings. They're demanding a review of the human ban." Councillor Zine looked up, her translucent face weary. "Perhaps we should grant it." "No," Veltar barked. "That would legitimize them, give them a platform." "Maybe they deserve one," came another voice. Councillor Straw, the insectoid delegate from the Velon hives. "I fought beside humans. I saw what they did for our colonies during the plague wars. They gave everything, and we turned on them the moment we felt afraid." Veltar's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting we just forget centuries of instability, their violent tendencies, their unpredictable—" "They're not the only unpredictable species here," Zine interrupted quietly. "But they're the only ones we erased when they didn't fit." The room went silent. Because deep down, none of them could deny it. The ban hadn't been about protection. It had been about guilt. Far from the polished halls of power, something was happening on the ground. In the slums of Drawl 6, where humans had once lived in scattered colonies before the Purge, alien graffiti artists began painting murals of human figures, arms open, standing against explosions, shielding others. On a mining outpost near the Dead Belt, alien workers walked off the job until their supervisors acknowledged the human workers who had once saved them from collapse. In a spaceport on Zirelon Prime, an old veteran stood up during a commemoration and declared, "My brother in arms was human. He died for me. I won't let you pretend he didn't exist." The words spread like a virus of truth. Back in the tunnels, Celia and Mace reached an old maintenance hub, abandoned, forgotten. The air smelled like old oil and dead wiring. Mace slammed the door shut behind them and slid down the wall, exhausted. Celia dropped to her knees, setting up a small comms device. "We need to get this drive off-world," she said. "There's a human cell still active on Verta 9. They have ships, cloaking, if they can spread the archives even further." She stopped when she saw Mace wasn't looking at her. His eyes were fixed on a corner of the room. Laser sights, silent, red dots glowing against his chest. Celia turned slowly. Figures stepped from the shadows. Black armor, council extraction units. One of them raised a hand. Dr. Roan, Sergeant Duran, you are under arrest for violations of the council ban and for the distribution of classified human propaganda. Celia's heart pounded, but her hand never left the comms device. One press, and the full backup of the Earth archives would beam out to thousands of resistance nodes across the stars. They would never catch it all. She looked at Mace. He gave her a small nod. Then she hit the button. The screen blinked green. Upload initiated. They could take their bodies. But the truth was already free. Chains. Real, cold, metallic chains. That's what they used. Not the plasma binds, not the invisible energy cuffs the council favored for high-risk criminals. No, actual chains, rusted and heavy, as if they wanted to remind Celia and Mace they were beneath even standard protocol. Mace spat blood onto the floor of the prisoner transport. They're making a show of it. Celia, her arms pinned behind her back, stared at the dim light above them. Her wrists ached. Her throat was dry, but her mind was racing. "They're scared," she whispered. "That's why they're going old school. No tech. Nothing that can be hacked. They know someone's still out there." Mace turned his head toward her, one swollen eye struggling to stay open. "The drive?" "It uploaded, fully." For a moment, even in pain, Mace smiled. Then the door slammed open. 3 armored guards stepped inside, rifles slung across their backs, and a 4th, an officer, strode in with that same smug air the council always wore when they thought they'd won. "Dr. Celia Roan, Sergeant Mace Duran, you will be transferred to the tribunalship sanction. You will be tried in private. No press, no transmission. You will be buried in silence." Celia met his eyes. "Just like the others?" The officer didn't flinch. "This isn't about you. It's about stability." Celia leaned forward, despite the chains biting into her skin. "You call it stability. I call it a history written in blood and denial." The officer moved to strike her, but Mace growled low and stepped in front of her as best he could, even chained. "You lay a hand on her, and I swear—" The guard hesitated, then stepped back. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the look in Mace's eye. Maybe it was the realization that even captured, even bleeding, they weren't afraid. Aboard the sanction, the trial was prepared quickly. No jury, no observers, just a panel of council judges, most of whom already had their verdict etched into their cold expressions. "This tribunal," announced Veltar, standing tall at the center, "is not for vengeance. It is for unity. The accused have jeopardized galactic cohesion with emotional manipulation and unauthorized release of pre-ban data." Celia's voice cut through the chamber. "You mean the truth?" "No," Veltar snapped. "I mean human distortion. You poison minds with sacrifice stories and acts of bravery, isolated cases twisted into a campaign of sympathy. You want chaos." "I want memory," Celia said. "I want the truth about who we were and what we gave." Mace stepped forward. "I buried 67 aliens on my last assignment. Lerni, Revoxians, Narita. I dug graves with my own hands while you debated drone costs. We didn't poison the galaxy. We bled for it." Veltar ignored him. "You are relics of a species that refused to evolve. Emotional, violent, disobedient. Humanity had its chance." "Then why are you afraid of us now?" Celia said, eyes blazing. "If we're relics, if we're irrelevant, why are you holding secret trials in a locked chamber, afraid to broadcast even our words?" The silence that followed was sharp. No one moved. Even the judges shifted uncomfortably, because deep down, they knew. Everything had changed. And trying to silence it was only making the noise louder. Outside, across the galaxy, the effects of the Earth Archive's upload were reaching critical mass. On a moonside colony near Ardent 12, a crowd of Narata youths marched through their city square chanting, "Let the stars remember." Their parents watched, silent. A few joined them. On Keldrith Station, long banners were dropped from the upper levels, hand-painted murals of human rescue efforts, scenes censored from official records. Civilians looked up in awe, many seeing these acts for the first time. In a Catharn broadcast channel, a former military commander broke down during an interview. "A human boy, maybe 16, pulled me out of a burning wreck during the siege of Val. I never even got his name. The council told me to forget it." He looked directly into the camera. "I won't forget anymore." Back aboard the Sanction, the trial ended with no formal sentencing, because before they could finish reading the charges, every screen aboard the ship lit up, with faces, alien faces, thousands of them, one after the other, speaking. I remember when a human saved my village. They told me humans were monsters. They lied. I want the ban lifted. I want the truth back. Celia stared at the screen. Her lips trembled. She didn't know where the signal came from, how it was coordinated. But she didn't care. Because finally the galaxy wasn't just watching, it was speaking. The Sanction was never designed to withstand this kind of storm. Not physical. There were no bombs, no invasions. But still, it buckled. Under pressure, under truth, under the weight of voices the Council thought had been silenced forever. The main command deck flickered with unstable feed lines. Technicians shouted over each other, trying to cut the signal pouring in from all sectors, but they were overwhelmed. Celia and Mace stood at the center of it all, chained yet strangely free. Across every holoscreen, alien citizens spoke in raw, trembling voices. Children, elders, soldiers, scholars, none of them human, but all telling stories of the ones who were. A Velen woman cradled a faded photograph. "This is my son's savior. He had no scales, no shell, just skin and eyes that cried when my boy died. He buried him when the council said, 'Leave the dead behind.'" A Skarn miner wiped grease from his face. "We were trapped. The tunnel was collapsing. The humans stayed behind to hold the supports. I still hear their screams when I sleep." A Revoxian school teacher, old and weary, stared into her camera. "We taught our children lies. I see it now." The tribunal was frozen. Veltar shouted to cut the feed. His commands were ignored. Some of the judges looked away. Others just watched. Celia turned to him. Her voice was quiet, almost kind. "You can't bury us anymore. You're criminals," he spat. "Traitors." "No," Mace growled, stepping forward despite the chains. "You're just pissed the galaxy is remembering what you tried to forget." Then came the moment no one expected. A comms officer, a young Lurny woman, scales shimmering with stress, stood from her console. She turned slowly toward the judges. "I have a sister on Zirelon Prime," she said, voice trembling. "Last week she watched the archive. She didn't sleep for 2 days. She kept crying. Said a human saved her during the firestorms and no one ever believed her. Not even our parents." She looked right at Veltar. "Now they do." No one spoke. Something broke in that silence, something old, something rotting, and all at once the facade cracked. Back on Erevan, the streets had changed. Small protests had become full-blown demonstrations. People carried signs in Galactic Standard and Old Terran English. "Let them speak. Erase the ban, not the truth. We remember Earth." Council buildings were surrounded by peaceful marchers. Every time a screen showed propaganda, someone replaced it with a human story. A song, a face, a resistance had bloomed, but not in the shadows, in the open. And at the heart of it, the underground human network spread further. New allies joined daily. Aliens who once spat at the word human now helped smuggle supplies, spread data, build encrypted comms relays, not out of charity, not guilt, but because they believed now, because they remembered. On the sanction, things moved fast. The council could not continue the trial, not without facing a PR catastrophe unlike anything in galactic history. They couldn't execute Celia and Mace. Too many eyes watching, too many voices rising, too many fractures forming in their grip. So they offered a compromise. Exile, to be dropped on a neutral world. No communications, no transport. Better than death, they claimed. But Mace just grinned when they read the sentence. "You're not sending us away," he muttered. "You're releasing a virus." Celia smiled too. Ideas can't be exiled. As they were led toward the prisoner ship, under armed guard, the escort captain, a Revoxian soldier, leaned close and whispered so only they could hear. "You're not alone anymore." The ship launched, but not into silence, because across the stars something had changed forever. On warships and farms, in domes and spaceports, on barren moons and lush planets, people told human stories. Some whispered them, others shouted them. And for the first time in decades, the lie didn't hold. Because when the council banned humanity, they thought they were burying a problem. But they forgot something crucial. You can't kill a story once it starts telling itself. And now, humanity had become something more than just a species. It had become a movement, a mirror, a reminder, a revolution. The exile ship touched down hard, not on some distant, empty rock, as the council had promised, but on a lush green moon orbiting a dead gas giant, Alien 4, once a thriving trade outpost, now long abandoned after the collapse wars. Its air was breathable, the structures mostly intact, but there were no active systems, no networks, no beacons. It was the perfect prison, wrapped in natural beauty, a place meant to be forgotten. Celia stumbled as the hatch slammed shut behind them. Dust rose around her boots, and the wind carried the scent of moss and silence. Mace stood beside her, squinting into the thick forest that bordered the landing zone. "Well," he muttered, rubbing his wrists where the chains had been, "I've seen worse." She gave a tired smile. "This isn't the end." Mace looked at her. It's the beginning they don't see coming. What the council didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the resistance didn't end when Celia and Mace were captured. It evolved. The truth virus had spread far and wide. Humans who had been hiding on the outer colonies began stepping forward, revealing themselves. Some had spent years disguised as laborers, merchants, even as low-level tech support in council facilities. Now, with the galaxy questioning the ban, they no longer stayed silent. They reached out to alien allies who had once turned them in. And shockingly, many reached back. On the icy moon of Threxus, a group of young Revoxian scholars published the first uncensored anthology of human poetry, translated into 12 galactic languages. They titled it "The Heart They Tried to Silence." On Zerellan Prime, 2 Catharn scientists refused to delete the Earth engineering logs embedded in their AI systems. They stood by them, publicly, claimed they were vital to their own species' advancements. When pressured to recant, they instead released a video. "If we erase the past, we erase ourselves." The video hit over 9 billion views. On Alien 4, Celia and Mace explored what was left. Abandoned buildings half swallowed by vines, a communications tower stripped of its wiring, solar panels shattered by storms. But the bones of the place were good. "We could make this livable," Celia said one night, crouched by an old fireplace, flames dancing in her eyes. "We're not alone," Mace said, nodding toward the edge of the tree line. She turned. A light flickered between the trees, then another. Shapes moved, slowly, carefully. Celia stood, her breath caught in her throat. They came into the clearing, 3 figures, not human, a Lurnai, a young Velen, and an older Narata woman. They stepped into the moonlight, hands raised in peace. No weapons, no threats. The Narata woman spoke first. "We heard you might be here." Celia blinked. "How?" "The archives," the Lurnai said, a grin on his multi-eyed face. "They led us." May stepped forward. "Your resistance?" The Velen girl shook her head. "Not resistance, believers." They carried supplies, tools, maps, communications devices built from salvaged council tech. They had come not to rescue, but to join, and they weren't the only ones. Over the next few days, more arrived. In 1s and 2s, alien engineers, runaway smugglers, disillusioned students. Some brought messages from rebel cells. Others came simply to help build. And suddenly, Alien 4 was no longer a prison. It was a seed, a fire just beginning to burn. Back on Erevan, Veltar stood in front of a cracked mirror, his ornate robe slipping off one shoulder. The footage hadn't stopped. The voices hadn't stopped. And now, internal council polls were showing something unthinkable. A full review of the human ban was being demanded by 42% of member species. "They're rebuilding," his assistant said from behind him, fear in her voice. "Alien 4, it's spreading through the undernet. They're calling it New Terra." Veltar's claws dug into his desk. "Burn it. Burn the whole moon to ash." But he knew, even as he said it, they were too late. Because this wasn't about humans anymore. It was about truth, about memory, about the galaxy waking up from a long, controlled sleep. And once awakened, nothing would ever be the same again. The sun rose on Alien 4 in hues of orange and violet, casting long shadows across the moss-covered ruins that had once marked the grave of a forgotten trade colony. Now, it was reborn as New Terra. Smoke curled gently from chimneys built by claw and hand. Laughter echoed through the clearing where alien children played with improvised hover discs, guided by an old human engineer who once designed weapons of war. The scent of cooked food, real food, grown in soil that hadn't seen life in decades, wafted through the air. Celia stood on a balcony of the old comms tower, now refurbished into a command hub. Mace joined her, his sleeves rolled up, hands dirtied from a morning of hauling supplies. There were new scars on him, new lines on her face, but their eyes burned brighter than ever. "We were supposed to be buried here," Celia said quietly. Mace leaned on the railing, gazing at the village below. "Now look at us. We're a damn city." "No," she replied, smiling. "We're a message." Over the past months, New Terra had grown, not just in numbers but in meaning. It became a pilgrimage site, a haven, a whisper on every smuggler's breath and every rebel's prayer. A symbol. And not just for humans. The council still called it an illegal colony. But across the stars, people called it hope. In a black site bunker beneath council command on Erevan, Veltar stood with a trembling claw over a blinking red panel. He was watching drone footage, overhead scans of New Terra. His advisors had gathered, urging a hard decision. "They've built landing zones, satellite communications, a new library," said a surveillance officer, disgust dripping from his voice. "And now, they're forming a council of their own." "Species integration is growing," added another. "Even high-born Velon youth have defected." Veltar's eye twitched. "They think they've won." His voice had lost the thunder it once carried. His empire, their empire, was unraveling. Not with weapons, not with fleets, with stories, with a forgotten people who refused to stay buried. "They're daring to write history themselves," he whispered, "as if we don't control it." One of his aides stepped forward hesitantly. "Perhaps, sir. It's time we stop controlling it." Veltar stared at him like he'd spoken heresy. But deep inside, he felt what they all did. The tide had turned. Back on Alien 4, the first formal summit began. Not in a marble hall, not under banners of power, but in a converted hangar where alien and human delegates sat in a circle on old crates, worn cushions, and repurposed machinery. No thrones, no guards. Celia opened the gathering with a simple phrase. "We're not here to rebuild the old galaxy. We're here to imagine a better one." Then she stepped aside. A Velan scholar stood up. "For decades I studied council law. I enforced it. I see now I helped maintain a lie. I want to unlearn it and help others do the same." Next, a Revoxian farmer. "My parents called humans dangerous. I watched one carry my brother 10 kilometers to get help after a cave-in. I was 6. I never forgot his face." Then Mace took the floor. He didn't speak like a diplomat. "I'm not here to beg for a seat," he said. "I don't want apologies. I want a future. One where no kid gets told they're broken because of where they're from. One where truth gets told even when it's ugly." He looked around the circle. "And if we have to fight for it, we will. But I think maybe we don't have to fight alone anymore." The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was full, heavy, real. In the weeks after, ships began arriving, more than anyone expected. Some brought food, some brought books, some brought memories. But one, small and old, carried something else entirely. An elder Narata stepped out with a sealed relic, a black box from a crashed council ship dated from before the ban. Its contents had been erased, or so they thought. Inside was a voice recording, scrambled, damaged. But when they cleaned it, they heard it. A human voice. "I don't know if anyone will ever find this. If you do, tell them we didn't die with hate in our hearts. We died hoping one day they'd remember us as more than a mistake." Celia cried when she heard it. So did others. Because in that broken, fading voice was everything New Terra stood for. Years later, when the histories were rewritten, not by victors but by survivors, they did not start with a war. They started with a lie, a ban, and the day the galaxy saw the truth. They called it the day the screens remembered.